Welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Utecht, back with another great episode here in our series on Gen AI in higher education, as we seek to gain knowledge of what is happening in higher education today around generative AI, so we can prepare our high school students today for the classrooms they might find themselves in tomorrow. As we get started, I have a question for you to ponder. What do you find more inspiring, a policy or a manifesto? And what would happen if we turned our classroom policies into manifestos? Well, in today's episode, we're exploring how AI can be a powerful ally in the classroom, the ethical considerations we must address, and the pivotal role students play in shaping the future of AI in education. Our guest today is Dayamudra, an innovative English language educator with 25 years of teaching experience. Her work seemingly integrates wellness, social justice, and technology, creating inclusive and dynamic learning spaces. Dayamudra teaches at City College of San Francisco and has spent 25 years inspiring students from all over the world. She also has extensive experience working internationally, including founding an alternative school in India and leading educational projects in Indonesia, Guatemala, and Hungary. She brings a global perspective to her passion for language learning and community building. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to welcome any new listeners that might be new to the podcast and remind you to check out our free PDF guides on integrating AI in your curriculum, available now on our website, shiftingschools.com. It's packed with practical tips and strategies to help you navigate the evolving landscape of educational technology. While there, make sure to sign up for our Shifting Schools newsletter so you don't miss another free resource in the future. Now, before we get to today's interview with Dayamudra, here's a quick word from today's show sponsor.
Discover the power of acknowledgement with Libra. In a world where every staff member's dedication shapes the future, recognizing their efforts becomes our mission. Libra transforms your school into a place where achievements, big and small, are celebrated daily, creating a ripple effect of motivation and pride. Join the recognition revolution with Libra, where every achievement is a cause for celebration. For more information and a free demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com today.
All right, and with that, here's Dayamudra, a teacher at the City College of San Francisco, talking about how she leverages generative AI conversations with her students in her classroom. And with that, on with the show. All right, welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. I'm excited today to have a conversation with Dayamudra, who teaches at the community college level, which is a big passion of mine as well. I am a product of the community college system before I went on to my 4-year degree as well. And just talking about how generative AI is being incorporated into classrooms within community colleges and some of the stuff that Dayamudra is doing with your students. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks,
Tell
Jeff.
us a little bit
I'm
about
really
your
happy
background.
to be here. I love your podcast. And I want to say first, I really enjoyed your summer series on play. I teach at City College of San Francisco. I've been there. This is my 25-year anniversary. Thank you. For 15 years, until a couple years ago, I was running my own project in India, working with caste-oppressed students. So we started an alternative school there. I did that as a nonprofit, but we built a local team in India and did fundraising on this end. I've taught overseas. I've taught in Indonesia for 3 years, and I've led projects in Guatemala and Hungary. And I was a student in Japan, so I have a global perspective. But I really love language learning, and I love
that.
Teaching my students who come from all over the world, and they're here to learn English.
I love that. Let's dig in a little bit. I really want to get into some of the work that you're doing around Gen AI. And we noticed, Trish and I, when we were doing a little background, that over on LinkedIn, you had a post recently that you are working on AI manifestos with your students. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and what's been going on with your AI manifestos? This sounds like a cool project.
I noticed when AI came on the scene, there was a bit of a lag between what I was reading on LinkedIn and what I was hearing at my college. People were just realizing, how can we catch our students? They're using AI to cheat. And what's our policy going to be? And
yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
I felt, I don't know, it was a bit of a trauma response, I think, because there was a lot of fear and a lot of suspicion of students. And I felt like there were no students around that table.
Agreed.
I wanted to include them in the conversation, and I just wanted to expand the conversation a little bit to include people from other parts of the college, hear what they were thinking, include everybody, even the people who were like anti-AI, people that were pro-AI, just really I came in as a learner with curiosity. People I really turned to as leaders in my school and across the community college district were librarians. They were doing the most interesting work from the beginning. And they said the librarian's approach is a little bit different from ours. I think as educators, as classroom teachers, we think, okay, I have content area to teach. How am I going to teach this content to my students? And of course, we want an equity-minded framework and we want student-centered, but we really think of us teaching our students something. Whereas the librarians were telling me they saw themselves answering the question, like, how can I help you? Students would come in, I don't understand AI. I need to learn more about AI. And so I thought that frame was really interesting. Like, how can I help you? And so librarians were creating really interesting little mini courses for students to help them understand what AI was. And so that was the beginning. So being in conversation. And so I started just a bit of a timeline, right? Like November 2022 was when ChatGPT launched. That was when the whole thing exploded. And that Christmas break, I was really educating myself. And so then 2023, I think, is when things started to grow a bit with AI. And that's when I started talking to my colleagues. And in the summer of 2023, I started the beginning. This is an evolution, the Manifesto Project, but just asking my students, what do you know about AI? How are you using it? What are some ethical ways to use it? What do you think about cheating, not cheating? Like really just asking them and including them in the conversation. And it's just interesting to me that we don't do that more.
Agreed.
I know.
It's so crazy, right? We try to have all the answers for our students instead of including our students in, hey, this new technology is here. We are all trying to figure out how to use it. Let's have those conversations with our kiddos of how are you using it? I love that I do this with my trainings. I will have teachers say, how do we make sure kids are using it ethically? And I always say, that's a great question to ask your kids. Let's unpack ethical use of AI together
So that's
as
one
a class.
part of the Manifesto Project. So I really start with asking them. So it's evolved. Beginning in like summer 2023 was me just asking them and them telling me what they thought were best use practices of AI. But then I thought in my college in fall of 2023, things started to heat up and everything. These companies that sell the AI detection tools were just waiting to pounce on that fear.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, like people were not that educated about the tools, but they were just like, we need to get these tools, the cat and mouse game. We need to get these detection tools, these Gen AI detective tools to detect the Gen AI, and not even reading the research about how ineffective they were and the false negatives, the false positives.
No. Well, and then we set kids up. So then kids were trying to figure out how do I use AI to get around the detection tools? And then the detection tools are having to update to try to figure out and to your point, meanwhile, there's research going on behind the scenes that are saying, this is getting out of control and none of this is good. Like
it works for the companies that are creating the tools and answering the fear. But I guess my question is like, why is cheating the first thing that we go to? Like, why is suspicion of our students? Like, so I know that I have control over my classroom, so I can work with my students. I would just love for this to be a college-wide project. Why don't we have students around the table on everything in terms of technology? We really should be listening to them more. And I think down in Orange County, there's some really great work being done there. And they call it JUICE or something like that. And they just had over the summer, or in the spring, a whole AI summit led by students. So I think that's really interesting.
Well,
Yeah. So then with the AI detection, there was also like policy. We need policy. We need to tell students how not to use these tools. So one of the things that I thought was really important for myself, and I really tried to encourage in my colleagues, was we need to build our own digital literacy. We need to understand how these tools work. We're starting to make policy, and these tools are constantly changing. And then the other thing I was interested in was of the ethical issues. Not, of course, academic integrity is one part of that, but the international workforce issues of the people being exploited to create these tools in Africa, the environmental impact, the biases built into these tools, the algorithms, that has to be part of the conversation. What I was hearing was very black and white conversations of either these tools are bad, let's get rid of them, which is impossible to do, or these tools are great, don't get all complicated with ethics. But I actually find my students are very good at having a more nuanced conversation. And that's the training we're doing as educators.
I love that. And I think this is one of the things I'm very proud of. I help write the documents for the guidance here in the state of Washington. And when it came to the ethics, we just released a couple of weeks ago, as we're recording this in July. In June, about mid-June, we released our last updates. We've updated it twice. In our last update, we really focused on this ethical dilemma around it. And I love what you're saying, because we noticed that same thing. There are two different sides to the ethnic conversation, right? And the one side is, this is how we explain it in our guidance. There's the ethical use of the tool, right? So that's cheating, and should you use it in certain ways, and what ways would be considered an ethical use of AI? And then there's another ethics conversation around just the ethics of AI, the people that are being hired to train it, the idea of detection tools, the idea of the environmental impact. And I find a lot of times when we talking ethics about AI, we get all mixed up between those two. And so our hope was in our guidance is we, at the very beginning of the ethics, we say, we're going to talk about these. There's two different sides to ethics. Here, if you want to have this conversation, here are resources for the conversation around ethical use of the tool.
Right.
That's a different conversation than the ethics of AI, which is the environmental impact and the economic impact that it's having and trying to be sold. Every company's trying to sell you Gen AI now. That's an ethic of AI issue. And so I think you're right. There's great conversations to be had.
The last thing you said about the marketing of these tools to educators, to schools, I think is also a very important ethical conversation. We need to be around these tables and making these companies accountable and giving them input, not just becoming ambassadors and getting a badge or whatever. But the women that are really leading this conversation are a lot of women of color. And they're saying, our message is not don't use these tools. We need to be around these tables, creating the tools, testing the tools, vetting the tools. So I think we have a lot to learn from leaders sort of outside our usual pockets.
I love that. So when students write these AI manifestos, then does this become is your goal, this is a gateway into the manifesto for the school? Is this something for them to drive their own understanding?
I teach an ESL, English, they're English language learners. It's a public speaking class. So this is part of a group presentation. Okay. So part of it is skills for the 21st century in terms of collaboration and integrating information and higher level thinking. So there's sort of 5 parts. So the first is assessing student knowledge. What do they already know about these tools? And then exploring the things we were just talking about, bias and ethics, because I think that a lot of students don't know that piece. I think that's really important. But again, a nuanced conversation, right? And then the third thing is thinking about AI in education, specifically in terms of language learning. What's a good use of the tools to build your language learning? And a lot of that I learned from my students. They're using the tools in all sorts of ways. They're using tools I've never heard of.
Yeah.
They're digital natives, right? So they've got stuff on their phones. And then looking at manifestos. So I felt like a manifesto was much more inspiring than a policy. So a policy is basically, here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. Here's what's going to happen if you don't follow the shoulds and shouldn'ts. So a manifesto is a call to action. It's a reimagining of societal norms, and it's a blueprint for future thought and action. And I thought that's what we need. Like we need that kind of thinking to really blow up how we look at these tools and thinking ahead to what is the future for our students. Their future is going to be very different from my life as an adult. And my students are adults, 10 years ahead for them, 15 years, 20 years ahead. What do they need in terms of lifelong learning, and how can AI be part of that?
I love that. And it just makes me think to just as I'm thinking and doing all the work that I'm doing consulting with school districts, is instead of supporting school districts writing policies, what if I helped school districts write manifestos for the future? How different would that be just on our take around generative AI? That is, as a district, you said, here's our AI manifesto around all these conversations that we know we need to have, and we're going to be learning through these as it continues.
Yeah, we have a teaching of reading and language learning. We have what we call a mentor text. So looking at the Declaration of Independence, the Suffragette Manifesto, but also the Riot Girl Manifesto and the Earth Charter and the Water Justice Manifesto and the Afrofuturist Manifesto and the Surrealist Manifesto. Like, they all have a vision for something. There's even there's some really good ones. Let's see. The Hacker Manifesto. There are just a lot of different ones. And it's a vision, and there's just an energy to it. And it's not an us and them, it's an us. This is how we imagine the future for all of us.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Thank you for tuning in to Shifting Schools. Let's pause our discussion to spotlight Libra HQ, a breakthrough in using AI to deepen connections within organizations. Imagine an environment where every staff member feels truly seen and valued. This is the heart of Libra's mission. Libra transforms how leaders celebrate and recognize the personal and professional milestones of their team members. It's not just about reminders. Libra's AI dives deeper, offering insight into enhanced team cohesion and promote a culture where support and acknowledgement are paramount. Picture a school where every individual is acknowledged, from work achievements to personal victories, creating a culture of appreciation in just minutes a day. In these challenging times, where the demands on educators have never been higher, Libra offers a way for school leaders to lead with true empathy and compassion, ensuring every team member feels an integral part of their community's success. Discover how Libra can revolutionize your school's culture. For a demo, contact me at jeff@shiftingschools.com. Let's build a future where every educator and staff member feels connected and valued. And now, let's get back to our conversation.
You've also curated a amazing Google site, and we'll have links. We'll have links to the post about the AI manifesto. We'll have links in the show notes to this amazing Google site that you have curated around generative AI resources. I'm wondering if you can talk more about gathering those resources together and building that site, and how has that maybe helped you think more about what you want for the future of AI?
Yeah, originally it was just things were coming at me after the drop of ChatGPT in sort of November 2023. I mentioned that during that winter break, I was just learning as much as I could, pulling stuff off of social media. I learn a lot from LinkedIn every day. So I was trying to just curate stuff that I could go back to. And I was also attending a lot of webinars that I wanted to save. So originally it was a way for me to remember stuff, but then I thought my colleagues might really find this interesting. So I started dividing it up into sections. And I also did some interviews with other community college educators, because I really think it's a conversation. And there's some very visionary people. Some of the people that are on there is Alex Rocky from Bakersfield College. She started an AI working group early on at Bakersfield College. Fabiola Torres, who's done a lot of work with Equity Online. And so she was talking about how she's AI to differentiate learning and meet her students who have learning differences. That was really interesting. Jessica Kasparas from De Anza, she's the one who introduced me to Joy Buolamwini and a lot of these women that are doing work on equity. And then Benny Ning from LA Pierce College. And he was talking just about the way that he uses AI tools in his course design. So very different perspectives, but all really coming from this place of curiosity and also just a lot of generosity, like really being willing to talk about it. So I thought, I want to save these conversations so you can listen in like a little mini podcast, a very low tech podcast, things they had to say, and see it evolve over time. That this was from last year, so maybe things have changed since then. I've been adding things to it and having things in there about course design and assessment and digital literacy and and then also there's just been some really interesting things coming out from UNESCO and the EU and Australia Department of Education. So wow, like when we talk about policy, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's see what they're doing in Australia. Let's be in conversation with Australia. This is a global topic. And this little guide of mine, a very low-tech guide, is basically a list with links, but it's been shared around the world. And I'm in conversation with people now from all over the world, people doing really interesting things in Ireland, in India, in South Africa.
Yeah. And I love that because really that's the power of the internet, is knowing that you're not in this alone, that we're all trying to figure out this new technology together. And I agree with you. When we were writing the Washington State guidance, we were using a lot of stuff like UNESCO has done some incredible work on this in ways that are just beyond what is happening inside the United States. We looked very closely at the Australian framework. They've got a great framework out, and so does the EU and some of the EU nations. And so it was great to be able to grab all these different frameworks and ideas and thoughts around different parts. And then our goal is just like, how do we make this focus for K-12? And that was what I was working on here with the state of Washington. But you're right. There's just so many great conversations going on. And you've put together an amazing site. We'll make sure it's in the show notes. If anybody wants to go and visit it, you really there's just a great list of articles and webinars and podcasts that you can go as deep as you want to go and as deep as you need to go on that website for yourself. So it's a great little resource. So thank you for creating that for the global good of us all.
I think this week I noticed on LinkedIn that the World Economic Forum just came out with some guidance around AI. I'm really excited to check out what they're publishing. And I've done a lot with their work on the future of jobs. And I think that's also another piece of AI, that people are going to be expected to use these tools at the community college level, looking at the students coming in and the students going out on either end. What are we preparing students for? What's the preparation they come to us with, right? I know I'm not K-12, but I'm sure a lot of students are coming in. My niece is 18. She's going off to college this fall. She's going in with a lot of AI literacy and competence already. Are her professors ready for her? They're ready for students like that. Then going into the job market, if we're gatekeeping and telling students, don't ever use AI, they're not going to be ready for what they're expected to do in their job, in their new job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, I'm sure you also talk with people outside of education, but that's what I'm finding is every industry leaders that I'm talking about, I've not found one industry leader that's saying, we hired you to do job X. Could you please do that as inefficiently as possible without AI?
We don't want you cheating.
Nobody's saying that. No cheat. I hired you to get a job done. I don't care how you get the job done. The more efficient you are, and if AI helps you be more efficient, then you use AI to be more efficient. That's just the way it is. And I agree with you. I think it's going to become one of those things where it's going to set you apart. But I don't think employers in the very near future will even list it as a skill needed. We're just going to assume you know how to use Word. We're going to assume you know how to use Excel. We're going to assume you know how to leverage AI in appropriate ways for your
We're
job.
not going to test your typing skill anymore. That's what we're doing.
We're just going to assume, if you apply for this job, we're going to assume you can type.
Is Saba Kidwai. She really talks about what's needed in the new workforce, and she gives a lot of resources to help people become ready. So she's somebody that I follow with a lot of interest.
Yeah, that's great. Good recommendation. You've had an incredible career and a unique one. You've traveled the globe. You've studied yoga, been at Stanford University as an EPIC Fellow. What about your background has prepared you to be looking for the opportunities generative AI might have for higher ed?
I think I just finished my doctorate a couple years ago. I went back to do my doctoral work in my 50s. And I have a refreshed understanding of what it means to be a student right now. And I finished my doctorate before ChatGPT dropped, unfortunately. Feel connected with like the people in my program were much younger, and they were using technology in lots of ways that I didn't know how to do yet, but I learned from them.
Yeah.
I came in with my skills and note cards and
and you're looking for the microfiche. You're like, where's the microfiche that I can go? That's what I always go to. I'm like, where's the library with all the microfiche?
So I think part of it is that I feel a lot of empathy for my students. And I'm just very curious about technology. I think maybe I was really lucky. I started training to become an online teacher in 2017. And so really open to learning new technology, and I've had to upgrade my skills. And so I think that led me down this path of really following. One thing with online learning, you're working in isolation. So I really built a community of online educators on Twitter before it became X, and now on LinkedIn. And so that's really where I get a lot of ideas. And so even my own education about AI has come from my colleagues on LinkedIn, really, and all the different webinars that I've been led to.
I'm finding that too. And I think that's just good for our audience to hear is we had some very robust communities on Twitter X that I feel like have just as of late gone away for multiple different reasons, of which we don't need to go into here on the podcast. But I do feel like a lot of those communities have moved over to LinkedIn, and that's becoming, even for myself, I'm spending more time on LinkedIn than I am anywhere these days as well. Because I just feel like it's a great conversation over there, a good community of educators trying to do good stuff and sharing what's working, much like Twitter was in the day, and back in its heyday. But it's just a great place to go. So if there are educators listening to this or just not knowing where the communities went, I think LinkedIn's a good spot to go and start creating your connections over there, because there's some really conversations to have.
There's some really creative features on TikTok as well. As I think as we learn new tools, of not being snobs about the different platforms, like really being curious, where are the younger people, and seeing what people are doing on TikTok. And I'm just fascinated by all of it.
Do you think right now we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of ChatGPT, which is really, I think for most of us would say, is a big turning point in this Gen AI stuff. As you work with your colleagues at community colleges and talk to others, where do you think our mindset should be right now as educators? Are we still in this we just need to be really, if you don't want to dig in, if tech's not your thing, just be curious. Is that a good place to be right now? What do you
I mentioned Saba, and I think the one thing I've really learned from her is it's not the tools, it's the mindset. And so I think that we should really be careful about getting too micro with the different tools and the training of the tools. You can learn a tool. Like, if you don't know ChatGPT, I can teach you prompting in an afternoon. Like, for teachers, we know how to learn things. How to, the tools, how we can use them well is something else. And what do we actually need? And I also feel like that's really important in terms of vetting, because these tech companies are just waiting. They're just waiting to come in and sell us stuff. I was just invited to an AI summit that cost $200. And I thought, oh, very interesting. Who is this summit for? If it's $200, it's not for me, because I'm not paying $200 out of my own pocket. Of course, I can get funding, but for an AI summit, do you want teachers there? So I think we need to be quite aggressive in getting around those tables and telling our stories on LinkedIn and really standing up. I'm not an expert on coding, but I am an expert on learning. I've been at the community college for 25 years. I know language learning. I know student-centered education. I'm committed to and inclusivity. And we need to bring those topics around the table to create better tools and have the tools serve us and have the tech companies answer to us rather than the other way around.
I love that. I love that take. And I couldn't agree more. Is we know what good learning looks like. That's what we are taught to do. And ask hard questions. I think, especially right now, this is such a new area. There are so many new programs coming out. There's going to be more AI bots coming out in the next, they already are. They're just flooding us. But it's a great time, though, to be very critical of them and say, one of the things that I tell teachers all the time is, when you have somebody pitching you an AI, ask, what's it trained on? What is its training material? How are you making sure that its training material is not biased? If you're being ChatGPT and just scraping the internet is biased. That is a biased set of data. How are you making sure? We can ask those questions. Even if you don't understand the technology, ask the questions that you know are good for your students.
Los Angeles Unified just made a deal with an AI company that went belly up. They lost millions of dollars. So they're like, let's bet these companies a little bit too.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. If educators listening to this want to reach out to you, want to connect with you, again, we will make sure that we have the post to your LinkedIn article that we talked about around the AI manifesto and that amazing Google site that you have. We'll have a link to your LinkedIn profile. Are there any other places
I think
that
LinkedIn's
educators
the best
could reach
way.
out to
My
you?
website is It's been on my to-do list for a couple of years, and it's a work in progress. So I think LinkedIn's probably the best way.
Awesome. We'll make sure that's in our show notes as well. Dayamudra, thank you so much for spending time with us today, for sharing your thoughts and ideas. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the work that you're doing in our community colleges.